What if I told you there are buildings on this planet that modern engineers cannot explain? Structures so precise, so impossibly advanced, that some of them make our best 21st century technology look primitive by comparison. We're talking laser flat surfaces carved into granite thousands of years before the laser was invented. We're talking walls so perfectly fitted that you can't slide a human hair between the stones, built by people who supposedly had nothing but copper chisels and rope. Something doesn't add up. Drop your wildest theory in the comments right now. Smash that like button if ancient mysteries keep you up at night. And subscribe so you don't miss what we're about to uncover. Because today we're visiting 6 structures that have no business existing. Here's the thing. We like to think of history as a neat, straight line. Cavemen, then farmers, then cities, then us. Nice and tidy. But every once in a while, somebody digs something out of the ground that shatters that comfortable little timeline into a million pieces. And that's exactly what these 6 places do. They don't just push the boundaries of what we think ancient people could accomplish. They demolish those boundaries entirely. Today we're traveling from the scorching plains of Lebanon to the volcanic mountains of Ethiopia, from the jungles of Cambodia to the windswept coasts of Scotland. And at every stop, we're going to find the same disturbing pattern. Precision that shouldn't exist, engineering that defies the tools available, and questions that nobody, not archaeologists, not physicists, not anyone, has been able to fully answer. What you're about to learn might completely change how you think about the people who walked this earth before us. So, let's start with a place that makes even seasoned engineers lose sleep. Picture the Bekaa Valley in eastern Lebanon. It's hot, dry, and dusty. Roman ruins are scattered across the landscape like broken toys. Tourists snap photos of the usual columns and arches, the kind of stuff you'd expect from the Roman Empire. But beneath the famous Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek lies something that has absolutely nothing to do with Rome. Something far older, far heavier, and far more disturbing. Embedded in the foundation platform of the temple complex sit 3 colossal stone blocks, known as the Trilithon. Each one weighs approximately 800 metric tons. That's roughly the weight of 2 fully loaded Boeing 747 airplanes stacked on top of each other. And these aren't rough, crudely hacked boulders. They are perfectly rectangular, smoothly finished, and fitted together with seams so tight that mortar was completely unnecessary. The Romans get the credit in most textbooks. The official story says legionnaires quarried and placed these stones sometime around the 1st century AD. And sure, the Romans were brilliant builders. Nobody's disputing that. But here's where the story cracks wide open. About 800 meters from the temple, still lying in its quarry, sits the stone of the pregnant woman, a single block weighing over 1,000 metric tons. And in 2014, archaeologists discovered an even larger stone beneath it, estimated at a staggering 1,650 metric tons. That's heavier than 3 international space stations combined. Now, ask yourself a simple question. Why would anyone quarry a stone that heavy if they couldn't move it? The largest modern mobile crane on Earth, the Lalibela LTM-11200, maxes out at around 1,200 metric tons under ideal conditions. And that's with hydraulic systems, steel cables, and computer-guided precision. The Romans had none of that. They had wooden rollers and human muscle. Some engineers have run the calculations. Moving one of these blocks across flat terrain would require a coordinated pulling force of around 40,000 men, all pulling in perfect synchronization. Across uneven rocky ground, the numbers become physically impossible. Alternative theorists have suggested everything from acoustic levitation to anti-gravity technology inherited from a pre-flood civilization. The idea is that the Trilithon predates the Roman temple by thousands of years, and Rome simply built on top of a much older, much more advanced foundation. Mainstream archaeologists push back hard on this. They point to tool marks consistent with Roman iron chisels and reference Roman engineering manuals that describe methods for moving heavy loads using systems of pulleys and levers. And honestly, that's a fair argument for the 800-ton blocks. Maybe, just maybe, a massive organized workforce could have pulled it off. But it doesn't explain why they quarried a 1,650-ton block they never used. It doesn't explain the precision of the joints at a scale the Romans never replicated anywhere else in their empire. and it definitely doesn't explain why later Roman construction on top of the platform is visibly cruder and less precise than the foundation beneath it. Something was there before Rome, something we don't fully understand. And if you think a 1,000-ton mystery stone is hard to wrap your head around, wait until you see what's hiding in the mountains of Ethiopia. About 600 kilometers north of Addis Ababa, in the heart of Ethiopia's highlands, stands a cluster of 11 medieval churches that violate every instinct of conventional architecture. Welcome to Lalibela. In the late 12th and early 13th centuries, King Gebre Meskel Lalibela ordered the construction of a new Jerusalem. What he got was something that looks like it was designed by an alien architect using tools that wouldn't be invented for another 800 years. These churches weren't built, they were excavated. Each one was carved from the top down, chiseled directly out of solid volcanic tuff in a single continuous piece. The most famous, Beit Georgis, the Church of St. George, is a perfect cruciform shape, 12 meters tall, sitting in a pit 25 meters deep. When you stand at the edge and look down, your brain genuinely struggles to process what it's seeing. There are no joints, no seams, no separate blocks fitted together. The entire structure, walls, windows, columns, roof, drainage channels, everything, is one continuous piece of rock. To achieve this, workers had to remove an estimated 36,000 cubic meters of stone from around and beneath each church. That's enough rubble to fill about 14 Olympic swimming pools per church. And they had to do it with absolute precision, because one wrong chisel strike in the wrong direction would ruin the entire monolith permanently. There's no undo button when you're sculpting a building out of a mountain. The official timeline gives the builders roughly 24 years to complete all 11 churches. Engineers who've studied the site say that's borderline impossible. Even with a workforce of thousands laboring around the clock, removing that volume of basaltic rock with iron hand tools would require a pace of excavation that doesn't match any known medieval construction project. The internal chambers feature pillars with load-bearing arches, intricate window lattice patterns that filter light in specific geometric shapes, and an elaborate system of drainage trenches carved into the bedrock to channel rainwater away from the structures during Ethiopia's brutal rainy season. Some of these drainage systems run underground for dozens of meters and still function perfectly today, over 800 years later. Local Ethiopian Orthodox tradition holds that angels helped King Lalibela build the churches at night, doubling the work speed. Skeptics dismiss this as legend, but some alternative researchers have noted something curious. The tool marks on certain interior surfaces appear too uniform and too smooth for iron chisels against volcanic rock. The cuts look almost machine-made. One geologist who studied the site in 2007 noted that certain interior walls show a surface smoothness measurable to within 2 millimeters of flatness across spans of several meters. That level of precision in a material as tough as welded tough, with medieval hand tools, pushes credibility to its limit. The mainstream explanation says it was simply extraordinary skill, generational knowledge passed down through master stone carvers, and an unlimited labor force motivated by religious devotion. And that might be true, but it still doesn't explain why nobody in the 8 centuries since has ever managed to replicate the technique. If it was just skill and devotion, where are the copies? Now, if the idea of carving a church from a single piece of mountain already broke your brain, let me take you somewhere that's going to shatter the pieces even further. Fly roughly 6,000 kilometers east from Ethiopia, cross the Indian Ocean, and you'll land in the dense tropical forests of northwestern Cambodia. Here, swallowed by jungle and strangled by the roots of enormous silk cotton trees, lies the largest religious monument ever constructed by human hands, Angkor Wat. Built in the first half of the 12th century under King Sacsayhuaman II, this Hindu temple complex covers approximately 162 hectares. That's bigger than most modern city centers. The main temple structure alone, with its 5 iconic lotus bud towers, required an estimated 5 to 10 million sandstone blocks, each weighing between 1.5 and 6 tons, quarried from the Kulen Mountains roughly 50 kilometers away, and transported to the site by river and canal. But the truly mind-bending part isn't the size, it's the precision. In 2015, a team of researchers using airborne laser scanning, a technology called LIDAR, peeled back the jungle canopy and discovered something that rewrote everything we thought we knew about the Khmer Empire. Angkor Wat wasn't a standalone temple. It was the ceremonial heart of a sprawling urban network that, at its peak, housed nearly 1 million people, making it the largest pre-industrial city on the planet. The LIDAR scans revealed a sophisticated hydraulic system of canals, reservoirs, and distribution channels that managed water across an area of over 1,000 square kilometers. This wasn't primitive irrigation. This was a fully engineered water grid, designed to handle both monsoon floods and dry season droughts, controlling the flow of millions of cubic meters of water annually. Modern hydrologists who've studied the system say it demonstrates an understanding of fluid dynamics and large-scale water management that rivals anything built before the 20th century. And here's the detail that haunts engineers. The entire Angkor Wat complex is oriented with a deviation of less than 0.1 degrees from true cardinal directions. The central tower aligns with the spring equinox sunrise with an accuracy that would be impressive with modern GPS surveying equipment, let alone 12th century tools. Some researchers believe the temple's layout encodes astronomical information, with distances between structures corresponding to cycles in Hindu cosmology, measured in units that map to actual celestial periods. The alternative crowd points to this astronomical encoding as evidence of inherited knowledge from a much older, more advanced civilization, possibly one connected to the legendary builders of the pre-Angkorian period. Mainstream scholars attribute it to the extraordinary sophistication of Khmer mathematics and astronomy, which was heavily influenced by Indian scientific traditions. They're probably right. But the fact remains that this city, home to 1 million people, managed water across 1,000 square kilometers, aligned to the cosmos within a fraction of a degree, and then collapsed so completely that the jungle swallowed it whole. A civilization that advanced doesn't just disappear. Or does it? Hold that thought, because our next stop involves something even more unsettling, a wall that shouldn't exist, on an island at the edge of the known world. Off the western coast of Scotland, battered by North Atlantic storms, lies a tiny uninhabited island in the Outer Hebrides called Eilean Mor. There's not much there. Rough grass, seabirds, wind that never stops. But on this island, and on dozens of similar islands and coastal sites stretching from Scotland to Ireland, stand structures made of dry stone construction, so precise and so weatherproof that they've survived without maintenance for somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 years. They're called Brochs, and the finest surviving example is the Broch of Mousa on Shetland. It stands 13 meters tall, the tallest prehistoric structure in Britain, and it was built entirely without mortar. Every single stone was carefully selected and placed so that the double-walled tower, with its internal staircase spiraling between the walls, has stood through 5 millennia of some of the most violent weather conditions on Earth. But here's the engineering detail that drives modern architects crazy. The walls curve inward as they rise, creating a cooling tower shape that's aerodynamically optimized to deflect hurricane-force winds. This isn't a shape you stumble upon accidentally. It requires an understanding of how air pressure interacts with curved surfaces, the kind of understanding that wasn't formally described until Bernoulli's principle in the 18th century. Inside the walls, the spiral staircase is built using cantilevered stone slabs, each one precisely angled to transfer its load into the wall behind it, without any central support column. This technique wouldn't be seen again in European architecture until the grand spiral staircases of Renaissance castles, roughly 3,500 years later. There are over 500 known Broch sites across Scotland. Carbon dating puts most of them between 400 BC and 100 AD during the Scottish Iron Age. The builders left no written records. We don't even know what they called themselves. Mainstream archaeology attributes the Brochs to local Iron Age farming communities who've developed sophisticated building techniques over generations. And that's a perfectly reasonable explanation. But it doesn't address one nagging question. Why are the oldest Brochs, the ones carbon dated to the earliest periods, often the most technically accomplished? If this was a gradual development of skill, you'd expect the earliest examples to be the crudest. Instead, the pattern is reversed. The technology appears fully formed, as if the builders already knew exactly what they were doing from the very beginning. Some fringe researchers have linked the Brochs to a lost Atlantic maritime culture, a seafaring civilization that predated the Celts and possessed advanced knowledge of stone construction and aerodynamic design. Mainstream scholars reject this entirely, pointing out that simpler precursor structures called roundhouses exist in the archaeological record. And they have a point. But the leap from a simple roundhouse to the double-walled, cantilevered, aerodynamically shaped Broch of Mausa is like the leap from a paper airplane to a 747. Something is missing from the story. And speaking of missing pieces, our next destination might have the biggest missing piece of all. Travel south from Scotland, cross continental Europe, hop across the Mediterranean, and keep going until you reach the central highlands of Turkey. Here, in a region so remote that it was farmland for generations before anyone noticed what lay beneath, German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt made a discovery in 1994 that broke the timeline of human civilization in half. Gobekli Tepe. The name translates roughly as Potbelly Hill, and from the surface, it looked like nothing special, just a rounded mound covered in scrubby grass. But when Schmidt started digging, what emerged from the earth sent shockwaves through every archaeology department on the planet. Beneath the soil lay enormous circular enclosures ringed with T-shaped limestone pillars, some of them standing 5.5 meters tall and weighing up to 10 tons. The pillars are decorated with elaborate carvings of animals, lions, foxes, scorpions, vultures, snakes, all rendered with an artistic skill and anatomical accuracy that would be impressive in any era. And then the radiocarbon dates came back. 9,600 BC, 11,600 years ago. That's roughly 7,000 years before the Great Pyramid of Giza. It's 6,000 years before Stonehenge. It predates the invention of pottery, the domestication of animals, and, according to everything we thought we knew, the development of organized religion and monumental architecture. According to the established model, humans in 9,600 BC were nomadic hunter-gatherers living in small bands. They had no agriculture, no permanent settlements, no social hierarchy complex enough to organize hundreds of workers for a multi-generational construction project. And yet, Gobekli Tepe exists. Its limestone pillars were quarried from bedrock hundreds of meters away and transported to the hilltop without wheels, without draft animals, without metal tools. Experimental archaeology suggests that moving a single 10-ton pillar with Neolithic technology would require at least 500 people working in coordination, which implies a food surplus large enough to feed them, which implies agriculture, which supposedly hadn't been invented yet. It's a chicken and egg paradox that has turned conventional history upside down. Some researchers now believe that Gobekli Tepe proves religion came before farming, not the other way around. That the desire to build a sacred site actually drove humans to invent agriculture as a way to feed the construction crews. But the mystery gets deeper. Around 8,000 BC, someone deliberately buried the entire complex. They didn't abandon it. They carefully filled every enclosure with soil, rubble, and animal bones, sealing it intentionally. This was an enormous effort, potentially as labor-intensive as the original construction. Why would anyone spend generations building something monumental and then spend generations burying it on purpose? Some alternative theorists believe Gobekli Tepe was built by survivors of a cataclysm, possibly the Younger Dryas impact event around 10,800 BC, when a comet fragment may have struck the northern hemisphere and triggered a mini ice age. The carved pillar known as the Vulture Stone has been interpreted by some astronomers as a record of this event, with animal symbols representing constellations, and the scene depicting the comet strike itself. Mainstream archaeologists are cautious. They acknowledge that Gobekli Tepe has fundamentally changed our understanding of prehistoric societies, but they resist the more dramatic interpretations. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in between. But one thing is certain. Whoever built Gobekli Tepe possessed knowledge and organizational capability that our models say shouldn't have existed for another 5,000 years. And they chose to bury it. What were they hiding? What were they protecting? Or what were they sealing away? Keep that question in mind, because our final stop is going to bring every thread of this journey together in a way you won't expect. Our last destination takes us to the remote Pacific coast of South America, high in the Peruvian Andes, to a fortress that sits above the ancient Inca capital of Cusco. Sacsayhuaman. Even pronouncing the name is a challenge, but the real challenge is explaining how it was built. The walls of Sacsayhuaman are constructed from enormous limestone and andesite blocks, some weighing over 120 metric tons, fitted together in an interlocking jigsaw pattern so precise that, even after 5 centuries and countless earthquakes, you cannot fit a razor blade between the joints. No mortar was used, no adhesive of any kind. The stones hold themselves in place through sheer precision of cut and the force of gravity. And these aren't simple rectangular blocks. Each stone has a unique, irregular shape, with multiple angles and curves that interlock perfectly with every neighboring stone, like pieces of a 3-dimensional puzzle. Some blocks have as many as 12 precisely cut angles. To achieve this, each stone would have needed to be trial-fitted against its neighbors hundreds of times, shaved down fraction by fraction until the fit was airtight, with the hardest available tools being bronze and stone. The labor required for a single joint is almost incomprehensible. The Spanish conquistadors who first saw Sacsayhuaman in the 1530s were stunned. Pedro Cieza de León, one of the most reliable chroniclers of the conquest, wrote that neither the aqueducts of Rome nor any other structure he had seen could compare to the fortress. They asked the local Inca how it was built. The Inca said they didn't build it. They told the Spanish that the walls were already ancient when their empire arose, that they were the work of the gods or of a race of giants who had lived in the time before time. Modern archaeologists attribute the construction to the Inca Empire, dating it to the 15th century AD, and the Inca were undoubtedly extraordinary builders. But there's a curious pattern at Sacsayhuaman that few official accounts address. The oldest, lowest courses of the wall, the foundation layers, feature the largest and most precisely fitted stones. The upper courses, which are definitively Inca, are noticeably smaller and less precisely joined. It's as if the Inca were building on top of someone else's work, adding to a foundation they found but didn't fully understand. Some researchers have proposed that the lower megalithic courses represent an earlier, pre-Inca construction phase, possibly thousands of years older. Others suggest that the Inca had specific techniques for softening stone using plant-derived acids, allowing them to mold blocks like clay before the material rehardened. There are even accounts from early colonial chroniclers describing a small bird that knew of a plant whose juices could dissolve rock. Legend? Possibly. But in 2013, a French materials scientist experimented with oxalic acid derived from local Andean plants and demonstrated that it could, in fact, soften the surface of andesite enough to allow reshaping. Not proof, but a tantalizing hint that there might be a lost technology of stone chemistry that we've only just begun to rediscover. And here's the final mind-bending detail. Sacsayhuaman sits in one of the most seismically active regions on Earth. Major earthquakes have flattened modern buildings across Peru dozens of times. The Inca walls have never fallen. During an earthquake, the irregular interlocking stones shift slightly, absorbing and dissipating seismic energy, then settle back into place when the shaking stops. It's the same principle used in modern base isolation earthquake engineering, a technology we only developed in the 1980s. The Inca, or whoever came before them, figured it out centuries ago, maybe millennia ago, using nothing but stone and patience. So, what do we make of all this? 6 structures, spread across 6 different continents and cultures, separated by thousands of years and thousands of kilometers. And yet, when you line them up side by side, the same impossible pattern keeps appearing. Precision that exceeds the known tools of the era, scale that defies the known labor capacity of the culture, engineering principles that we only formally understood centuries or millennia later, and always the same unanswered question hanging in the air. How? Maybe the answer is simpler and more profound than aliens or lost super civilizations. Maybe the answer is that we have drastically, almost insultingly underestimated the intelligence and capability of ancient human beings. We look at people who didn't have smartphones and assume they were primitive. But what if they simply had a different kind of genius? A genius rooted in patience, in generations of accumulated observation, in an intimate understanding of stone and water and gravity that came from spending lifetimes, entire family lines, working with the same materials in the same places. We build fast and fragile. They built slow and forever. But here's the thought that keeps me up at night. If they were capable of all this, what else were they capable of that we haven't found yet? What knowledge was lost when libraries burned and civilizations fell? What techniques disappeared when the last master died without passing on the secret? Every one of these structures is a message in stone from the deep past. And the message is the same every time. You don't know us as well as you think you do. We were here, we were brilliant, and we left you puzzles that your finest minds still can't solve. So, I'll throw the question to you. Which of these 6 structures blows your mind the most? And what do you think is the real explanation? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. If this journey made you see the ancient world a little differently, hit that like button and subscribe so you're here when we go even deeper next time. Because trust me, we've barely scratched the surface. The past is stranger than we ever imagined, and we're just getting started.